Hi guys, welcome in or welcome back to Behind the Mic in the SEC. Sorry I'm not in my normal setup. It's spring break, so I'm recording on my phone for this intro. But this week is Ole Miss and Mississippi State week, where I spoke to sports reporter Gracie Barra from WCBI Sports in Starkville, Mississippi, and she covers Ole Miss and Mississippi State, which I think is so interesting, covering both teams. She talked to me about her journey from Indiana University to now, talking about growing up as a child sports reporter and how it's always something she wanted to do. She talked to me about her relationship and what it's like working with the late Mike Leach and Lane Kiffin, who I personally love as coaches and as personalities. So stay tuned, and here's episode 2.
My name is Grace, and I went to school at Indiana University.
And how did you start your career? How did you realize that journalism is what you wanted to do?
Yeah, mine is a little different than most people's, but my mom saw something on the Today Show when I was about 10. That was like an opportunity to do kid reporting, and I like to write. So she was like, "Okay, we'll sign you up for this. Maybe you'll get to do it." I did get accepted to do it. It was Scholastic was the first one, and maybe a week later they were like, Obama and Biden are coming to Kokomo, Indiana. You go up there and cover that. So I'm like this weird little 10-year-old at this event, and politics was definitely not what I wanted to do. That was what Scholastic had me doing a ton of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I eventually figured out we hosted the Super Bowl in Indianapolis, which is where I'm from, about 2 years after that, and I was still doing reporting. And then I was like, you know what? I love doing sports. We had the women's Final Four. I got to do that too when I was a little kid. And then I signed up to be a Sports Illustrated Kids reporter, got to do that. And just more opportunities were like, yes, this is something that I want to pursue professionally. So yeah, that's why I applied to IU to do journalism, other journalism schools too I looked at, but I've been basically doing it or known I wanted to do it for over a decade now.
That's really cool that you got to do that so young. So
Yeah.
it's like the sports reporting pretty much like once you got into that as a kid, you realized that this is all you wanted to do.
Yes, which is crazy. I feel like I never had a moment of doubt. It's a little silly. Maybe I should have thought about it and been like, oh, are you okay with making this little money? But no, I was fully set on it.
So what do you enjoy about covering Ole Miss and Mississippi State?
I enjoy the people a lot. Just a lot of really good personalities, especially when it comes to coaching. Big reason I came down here was opportunity to cover both Lane Kiffin and Mike Leach, which was really awesome this last year.
I think like
Obviously,
there's some of my like rest in peace to Mike Leach, but I think
yes,
like him and Lane Kiffin are probably some of the best personalities in college football. Like I love them as coaches.
100%. And all my friends that also covered the same teams, we have so many bits from their press conferences just because it was something every single time. We had an Egg Bowl special that we ran at my TV station, and my coworker literally just cut out all of the funny moments from all of their press conferences from the entire season and just spliced them together really quick. But yeah, it was so fun to get to work with both of them. Obviously, I'll get to work with Lane again this year, but um, Mike was awesome. Dealing with that was definitely extremely tough, just having known him personally and knowing so many people he knew personally. But it's awesome to cover both those teams, especially now with baseball, since they've both been so successful in baseball lately. I feel very, very lucky to have two amazing SEC programs so close to me.
And I know, did you do student journalism whenever you were in college? So
Yeah.
how is covering Indiana different from covering the SEC?
Well, at IU, all that really matters is basketball. Our football program, I think, was relevant for 2 years. We went to the Outback Bowl in Tampa our second year that we were really good. And we played Ole Miss of all teams, which is really funny. Got beat by Ole Miss. But basketball here is not that important to fans. Obviously, the teams are doing pretty well this year. We have 4 teams between the two schools, and I think 3 of them are going to make the tournament. So, um, pretty good postseason for both of them, both of those schools. But baseball is just big time. Indiana baseball. Ironically enough, the Mississippi State baseball coach came from Indiana, but I mean, just the drop off in fan base and how much people care is insane when you go back to Indiana. Like walking into Duty Noble Field my first time and seeing a stadium, a college baseball stadium that holds over 14,000 people is crazy. And like a student section at a baseball stadium, like I was used to none of that. So definitely there's a big difference in what sports are most important to cover. And I also like being at State and Ole Miss from the standpoint of like there's not as many media outlets that are at every single event, just because I feel like the South is obviously like less populated. Being closer to Indianapolis and just being at Indiana where there's a huge basketball program, like it was so difficult to ever get anything. But even here, you know, where you have two really big SEC football programs and baseball programs, you still can get the access that you want.
Yeah, it's kind of like the same as it is for you in Indiana as it is for me down here, because LSU's like our only big school. So we have
Right.
Baton Rouge media, we have New Orleans media, we have media from like Lafayette, Alexandria, like all over to cover LSU,
Right.
because it's like, who else are you going to cover? You know, there's like no other like huge school. But I mean, baseball, like I grew up watching LSU baseball. It's always been like that. Like LSU baseball is like up there. Like our student section's like crazy.
Student section like drives me. Like I didn't realize it, but then they'll be like chanting things. I'm like, I have never been to a baseball game where anybody has yelled anything at a player.
LSU's student section for football games. I don't know if you've heard of the next song.
Oh
Um,
yes.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. So there's that, but like anytime they play the Go Tigers chant after a first down, like we say some really foul stuff, and
Love it.
like just like anything that the band plays, the student section will make foul and just like
Good.
say some really out of pocket stuff, and it like makes it like 10 times more fun. And then like they scream like F whatever team, and I'm just like,
Yep.
oh, yep.
We do that a lot at IU
LSU.
for basketball. It's great.
Yeah.
My boyfriend also covers Mississippi State. He's a print reporter, and I didn't get to go down to Baton Rouge this year, which is very sad. But he went down to Tiger Stadium, and he literally like raves about it. He was like, "That was, I think, my favorite place." He's been at least in the SEC West. He loved it.
Yeah, it's so much fun. You definitely have to come down like one
No,
time. It's so fun.
I was sent to Georgia Tech that weekend because Ole Miss played there. I was like, whatever.
So, what could you say about the fan engagement in the SEC that you've never seen before?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I'm not too far into baseball yet, so I assume that'll come. People probably don't care as much about non-con. But football, it's crazy, especially after Mike Leach died. Like all eyes kind of turned to everybody in Starkville for news and for stories on Mike, and it was so cool to see how many people cared about him. Like they didn't have to be fans of Mississippi State or Wazoo or Tech. Like anybody around the world that was just a fan of his coaching, a fan of his personality, kind of all turned their eyes to Starkville. And it was very crazy to see how much engagement we could get on just like a simple story of he said this to me one time, and it was like something I remember. And yeah, definitely bowl games, any kind of football game, you could get a crazy kind of engagement. Basketball, not so much. Women's basketball actually at Mississippi State does the best out of all four of the teams we cover, because that team was successful so recently, even though they have a new coach this year. Definitely not back to that level of prominence yet, but yeah, they do well for some reason.
What would you say is your favorite sport to cover since you've been down here?
Ooh, I think I love football season. I was telling my boyfriend that I like baseball so far too, just because it's more like chill. But in terms of like what gets me most excited, I would say like SEC football games can't be beat.
No, definitely. So, what would you say so far is your biggest accomplishment in your career?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, I don't know. I'm only like a year, not even a year in yet.
It could be like college too, just like ever since like, you fell in love with this business, what's been your biggest accomplishment?
I guess in terms of like, I can give you like morally, not morally, whatever, how I feel accomplished, versus like in terms of awards, definitely last year I placed like second team All-American for the Gym Nance Award, which is like STA. So that was a really cool accomplishment. I'm like you don't need like an award to be told that you're doing a good job, but it was cool to get one. And that was what I told myself before. I was like, if you don't get it, it's fine. Like you still have a job. You're fine. Um, but I think a big accomplishment I feel like I had, especially at Indiana, was I came into the program, and I don't know if it was just the state of where, students were at that time. There were not a ton of women, especially at the newspaper, and I worked at the newspaper for part of it. I did broadcasting for part of it, and I was the first woman to edit sports at the IDS, which is our student newspaper at IU, in over a decade, I think. No, maybe a decade, maybe 5 years. And then I did the IU men's basketball beat, which is like our biggest beat. And I don't think a woman had done that in 15 years.
Wow.
So it was like that in itself was cool, but that wasn't what I cared about. It was more so I wanted to see like other women continue to do it after I was done. I didn't want me to be the only woman like on our sports desk and then leave, and then it just goes back to being men. And now I think there's two women, let alone like covering men's basketball at IU, which was not the case when I was there. There's several women still on the sports desk, like women editing. So it's been cool to see like the impact and have people still reach out to me about like how I helped them get into that space, because I was maybe a year late into that space because I didn't see any other women and I got very scared. But yeah, definitely helping women feel more welcome in the space of sports journalism, especially when you go into a press conference and it's all men. And that has continued to be the case down here
Yeah,
too.
there's been plenty of instances where I've been to a press conference or I've been to a game and like I'm the only woman there.
Yep.
And especially as a student, it's really intimidating because like you
Oh
see
yeah.
all these like men who've been in the business since I was born and like they know what they're doing. I'm scared to ask a dumb question. I'm scared to
Yep.
sound like I don't know what I'm talking about, even though I know what I'm talking about, you know?
It's
Um,
definitely tough because as a student, you already feel like maybe I'm not like taken seriously, not welcome. And then you add on like being a woman on top of that, then people are double not taking you seriously. And
right.
it's great.
So since you cover both teams, I have to know, what do you prefer covering? Ole Miss or Mississippi State? Who's your favorite?
So I live in Starkville.
Okay.
Um, so for the sake of driving, I appreciate covering Mississippi State more. But I do love Ole Miss. The fans for both have been nice to me. So except for at the Egg Bowl,
I was
I
who
did
do you cover at the Egg Bowl? Mississippi State?
both. This was
Okay.
last year. I covered Mississippi State. So my recap pack was on Mississippi State, which was great because they won. But the student section was just very mad at everything, and they were like throwing beer cans. It was like pouring rain, first of all. So I'm like in my rain jacket, like literally like dripping, and I have, like something on my camera. My peripheral is like shot. And I'm just like getting beer cans like tossed over my shoulder onto the field. And I'm like, please, if anyone hits me with beer, like I'm gonna be so mad right now. Even though I was already wet, I just didn't want to get hit with cans. So
Right.
that docked Ole Miss a little bit. That docked Ole Miss. But I do love both of them. Um, I just don't love the 2-hour drive to Oxford sometimes. Sometimes I'd be a little bit lazy.
Yeah. So I'm getting ready to graduate soon and I'm about to enter the job market, but I don't even really know where to start. Do you have any advice for me coming out of school?
Yes. So I was in your shoes literally a year ago, so don't feel like stressed. You'll make it through. Do you have like a reel and everything already made?
Yeah, I have a reel. And I've gotten a few LinkedIn like connections and stuff. People have reached out. It's called Magid Talent something. They reached out about like their program where they like send people's reels out to news directors and stuff. So I have a few outlets. I just don't know what I'm supposed to be looking for.
Yes. Okay. So the biggest piece of advice that I got last year was rather than like get an agent, because agents will take like a cut off of however much you make and you're not going to make a ton.
Right.
So it's like best to just not deal with them, especially when you're like starting out, you don't need them. What I did instead was there's a website called tvjobs.com, and you have to pay for it, like a subscription to it, but it wasn't that bad. Like I think a month was like $20 and like an entire year was 50. But it pools together all of the jobs that are like actively open. And you can narrow it down for sports. And that is how I literally applied to everything. Like I would just go out there every day, like find something that was new, as long as it wasn't, like too crazy high on the market, I would apply to it. And you don't hear back from most of them. But doing that, and then if you go through like the list of markets that you would want to work in and just email every news director like in those markets and just introduce yourself, like send your reel, say, hey, you're graduating, not sure if you have anything open right now, just wanted to like introduce myself. That works too. But yes, definitely the best places to find jobs I found was TV Jobs. I think STAA also has job boards.